Victoria 3 is young, but her modding scene, my friends, is great. And in this video, I'm going to take you through my favourite mods, the best mods for Victoria 3, as of right now. There'll be time cards linked below, but I'm not going to muck you about. Let's jump straight into the very first one, and it's Morgenrote, the Dawn of Flavor mod, created by Marco Dandolo. This mod is really fascinating because, as you can see on screen, it adds a whole load new flavour into Victoria 3. The project itself adds archaeology and astronomy, two big things with events and technologies, but also it focuses on some other things as well, cultural events around German-speaking and Italian nations, or perhaps the better representation of the Roman Catholic Church and its influence. There's loads to unpack. The reach for the stars is the astronomy part of the mod, the second part actually, as it's listed on the screen. And as you can see, it does a whole load of things, including adding some new technologies from classical to modern physics, astronomy, and even electromagnetism. A new building, but also these events, and these are really fascinating. Astronomical objects can be discovered, Neptune, Pluto, and of course with that brings prestige and all sorts. Prestige is also most notable here on the return of archaeology. This is the second part of the big flavor element to this mod, in my opinion. It, of course, and somewhat building on some of the sneaky things we've seen the developers tease lately, adds archaeology into the game. Historical excavation sites as a modifier on the map, the possibility to organize expeditions, and so much more. This mod probably deserves a video all in its own right, from 200 new events, mostly concerning expeditions, and so much more. There's a reason why it was first on my list, and I think it deserves this place. Next on my list, brought together by ex-Imperialist, is the Great Rework, and this is one of the most popular mods for very good reason. And while the list of its improvements may be horrifically long, take a look at some of the key focuses of what this mod project does. A collection of good improvements aimed to enhance Victoria 3 by changing and tweaking things to make the game more playable in multiplayer, but also in single player. It pulls together a variety of vital mods for Victoria, and you'll see all of them play out on screen, or at least all of the ones that I can fit into this relatively small section of the video. From Red Great Britain and relatively minor aesthetic changes to concrete gameplay features, Argentina rebalance mods included. The transfer cache is integrated, so is the explosive industry, the complete pop list, industrial slavery, the party western clothes, a building map list, as you can see, and so much more. National defense institutions, military academies, Napoleonic flavor, and more historical accuracy from the United States, and the ability to release US state mods, but also across the world, French politicians and generals, German ones too. The Great Rework really does live up to its name, reworking Victoria 3 across the board. Now, I have a separate dedicated video on this bad boy already, although even it was only 10 minutes long, and there is simply so much to unpack. I would highly recommend you check out ex-Imperialist's The Great Rework mod collection. It's not one to be missed. Next up on my list, and equally perhaps not one to be missed, is the Everyone mod by an Explorer. Although this one is slightly less polished than the rest of the additions on the list, I really do think it should be mentioned here. As you can see, I'm exploring across the world, finding a variety of unrecognized powers, which would usually not be playable nations in Victoria 3. However, the Everyone mod by an Explorer allows us to play as, you guessed it, everyone, or anyone. Either way, you can play as any power that you like in Victoria 3. However, it is important to note that you will run into one very clear and significant downside, and that's the fact that these nations aren't especially playable, even though practically they are. What do I mean by that? Well, take a look. You're probably going to end up in a nation with basically nothing. And that makes sense, of course, because these nations aren't coded as playable in the base game, except perhaps for the populations that they bring, or the resources that are placed on their maps. You will get those, but you won't get much else. Which brings me into my next mod, the Advanced Cheat Menu Plus. The Advanced Cheat Menu Plus is a fantastic mod that allows you to simply slot in any kind of yields that you like. Here you can see I'm using it to play as the Kazakhs, because of course these mods can sort of feed into one another. Maybe you want to play as a minor nation and think, well, I could just cheat in a little bit of stuff to allow it to be playable. Or you could do what I'm doing here and use some of the more powerful things that the mod lets you create. In this case, I'm completely shifting all of the laws and everything that makes up this nation to align better with a certain political ideology. And as you can see, the United States of America is about to feel ever more united after a little bit of quantitative easing. Thanks, Jerome Powell. We can print money with the Advanced Cheat Menu mod alongside, of course, any other yield in the game, which will open up flexibility for you as a player to do almost anything. If you want to play as the United Syndicates of America, for example, from the very beginning of the game, this mod will let you do that with one click of a button. And of course, the ideologizing and politicizing doesn't stop there. You can jump in at any old nation and become what the capitalists fear. And if they've been modded or perhaps coded in from the base game, then you'll be able to play as whatever fun flavor element they appear as. Here's the People's Republic of China, and of course the Russian Empire, turning towards its hammers and sickles and becoming ever more red or green in this case. The Advanced Cheat mod allows you to do a few things then, and it pulls together two existing mods to create a wonderful canvas for us to explore as players. Next up on my list, speaking of exploring, is Anbield's revision of the AI. A very interesting mod, although of course one that's hard to really show you in a video. However, I do have a few interesting things. Firstly, here you can see the description of the mod if you haven't read it already. It aims to basically fill in the gaps. It aims to produce a mod that focuses on making Victoria 3's AI as strong as possible without giving it any unfair bonuses. And what you're seeing on screen now, and I'll flick to another couple in a minute, is just how this mod did impact the AI at different years in the game. We'll next move to take a look at what is perhaps the most striking of all. Here you can see the year 1900. And the differences on the left, a normal AI version as of 1.06, slightly out of date, but good enough. And on the right, how this mod impacts how the AI has played throughout the game. And as you can see, certain players have risen and fallen. France, of course, loves to be boosted by the AI, not so much here. It's a really interesting one, and I'd encourage you to check it out if you want to make the game slightly harder, or perhaps make the AI play better. It seems to do both of those things quite well. And now for some specific lightning-fast honourable mentions. First up, we have the expanded flag pack, which is doing, by the looks, a really good job at jumping in across multiple versions and adding all of these new flags to Victoria 3. Apologies, United States fans. Maybe you'll get there eventually. The next honourable mention on my list in this lightning-fast brigade goes to none other than Yellow Prussia. This one, fairly self-explanatory why it's an honourable mention. It makes Prussia yellow instead of blue. Again, one thing that Victoria 3 fans have been calling out for. And lastly on this list, I'd like to add another mod from Ex-Imperialist, nightclubs, adding a new lust resource to the game, but of course also buildings to employ people, convert labourers, and all sorts of other things. The nightclubs mod is another interesting take on what can be done with Victoria 3 and just how the game may expand. Of course, it's early days for Victoria 3's mods, but I think you might agree with me that so far, so good. And thankfully, modding in Victoria 3 is only just getting started. It's also fairly easy to use. If in the Paradox Interactive Launcher you navigate to the Mods tab, you'll then be able to click Browse More Mods. If you have none installed, if you have some, you'll see them listed here. This will then take you to the mod landing page, where if you'd want, you could filter by maybe the best mods or the highest ranked, or filter by tags. However you want to do that, I'll leave that part up to you. The important thing to note is once you've done that and you've found a mod that you'd like to add, it's as easy as clicking download or subscribe if you have your, of course, Paradox Interactive account already logged in. If you choose to download it manually, you'll have to then drop the install folder into the correct place on your desktop, so generally speaking it is easier to log in with a Paradox account and then simply click subscribe, just like you've done of course on this channel. You'll then be prompted to add the mod to a playset. If you don't have a playset, obviously you'll need to create one, and if you do, you can call it whatever you like and then add mods into it. I'd recommend you just add all of your mods into one playset, at least in the beginning. Then back on the Victoria 3 launcher, you'll be able to navigate to playsets, and once you're inside of your playset, perhaps your one and only, or maybe you're swapping between a few, you can then choose which mods you want to play with in your current session by enabling or disabling them. Pick and choose which ones you like. Maybe they're compatible, maybe you're just looking for something a little different, and then it's as simple as going back home and launching the game. If you made it this far, you might consider subscribing. I've got loads more content that hopefully you'll enjoy just like this on the channel. Do let me know your suggestions below as well. It's impossible for me to try them all. I'm sure there are many gems out there, and I'll see you next time.